March 2021 Design Review Committee. Jared, if you can skip to the next slide. So this is the agenda for the meeting. If we could, I guess, before this begins, just go around and take a introduction so that we know that we have a quorum. That's typically required before we move into the other motions here. So can we start with the design team, and then we'll work our way back to planning staff. I can call on people if that's easier.
Eric, assuming you mean our design team, I'm happy to start. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Donchez. I'm from Somera Road.
Good morning. This is Ryan Terrell, Earl Swinson Associates.
This is Laura Bean, Senior Design Manager at ESA.
Kim Hawkins, Hawkins Partners, Landscape Architects and Planners.
Good morning. This is Parker Hawkins with Hawkins Partners, Landscape Architects and Planners.
Good morning. This is Jessica Porter at STD Design.
And then we have our other committee members, and we'll go to planning staff and then legal staff.
Ron Lustig with Earl Swinson Associates, ESA.
Ben Mosley, representing Metro Historic Zoning Commission.
William Hastings, representing the Planning Commission.
Hey, Russ Oldham, representing the Chamber.
Tamara Dixon with the Nashville Downtown Partnership.
James Moore.
Wonderful. Sorry, James.
Good morning, James Moore.
I think that's everybody from the Design Review Committee. I'm Eric Hammer. I work for the design studio of Metro Planning. Jared?
Good morning, everyone. This is Jared Islis with Metro Planning Design Studio.
And Harriet?
Harriet Jameson Brooks, Metro Planning.
And Nora?
Nora Yu, Metro Planning Design Studio.
And Joni?
Good morning, everyone. Joni Williams with Planning.
And to our other agencies, Ben?
Ben York, Metro Public Works.
And Alex?
Alex Dickerson, Metro Legal.
Thank you. As a reminder, because we are doing this virtually, item 1 is required. I'm going to hand over the mic to Alex in a second. But as a reminder, please, so it's not completely unclear, restate who you are if required during the meeting. But let's move to item 1, which is approval of the COVID-19 special motion. Alex?
Yes, Alex Dickerson, Metro Legal. I wanted to let everybody know a few things. One, the governor's executive order that permits electronic meetings also requires that anyone who's observing the meeting electronically is able to reasonably identify the speaker. So we just ask that if you're making a motion or second or interjecting without having first been called on by name, that you then respond by identifying yourself. That way we can comply with that aspect. But the motion that we're looking for is that the proposed agenda constitutes essential business of this body, and the meeting electronically is necessary for the health, safety, and well-being of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak.
It's Ben Mosley, so moved.
It's William Hastings, second.
Seeing a motion and a second, is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we would entertain a motion. As a roll call vote, I'll go around and call on the Design Review Committee members in order. So Ben?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Ron? Yes.
Russ?
Yes.
Tamara,
Yes.
and William.
Yes.
That is a unanimous motion for approval of the special motion. Moving on to item number 2, approval of the June 4th, 2020 DTC DRC minutes. Those should have been received with the initial packet here. Yes, it has been that long since this committee has held a formal meeting, which is quite unusual, but we would be entertaining a motion or an amendment if the committee so chooses.
Make a motion
to approve. Ron Lustig.
Seeing a motion and a second, is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, the question is called. Ben?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Russ?
Yes.
And William?
Yes.
That is a unanimous motion for approval of the June 4th, 2020 DTC DRC minutes. Seeing that item passed, we're going to move to item 3, which is cases for review. We have 2 cases on the agenda today, both of which are somewhat interrelated, so you may see presentations combined at some points. Jared Isles will be giving that presentation. As a reminder to everybody of the typical way this meeting functions, Jerry will be giving a presentation on the item. The applicant will also be then invited to give a presentation on the item. In between these two, the DRC members will be able to ask questions of either group, and then we'll move to a period of discussion, and then a motion will be called eventually. So with that being said, I'll just turn it over to you, Jared, to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning, committee members. This is Jared Isles with the Planning Department. Oh, let me switch my screen. The first item on the agenda is a request for approval of step back, floor-to-floor height, and MCSP modifications to the downtown code, as well as a request for a recommendation to the Planning Commission regarding an overall height modification. The subject property is located within the Gulch South subdistrict of the downtown code and is located near the intersection of 8th Avenue South and Division Street. The proposed building, Voorhees Tower 2, is 20 stories in height and includes 328 apartment units, ground level retail space, office space, and both underground and structured parking for a total of 395 spaces. Here's an aerial image of the site that shows the Voorhees Tower 2 location outlined in red. Voorhees Tower 2 is one building of the Voorhees Master Plan site. This development includes four total buildings, 2 of which are existing and 2 of which are being proposed. The existing buildings shown on this site plan in dark gray are the historic Antiques Mall and the historic Voorhees building. The proposed buildings shown here in light gray are mixed-use towers. The topic of this presentation, Tower 2, is positioned behind the historic Voorhees building. Tower 2's only frontage per the downtown code is on 7th Avenue South. Fogg Street was abandoned in 2019 and is now a private drive, and Allison Street is categorized as an alley. Access to Tower 2's parking garage can be from either Fogg Street or 7th Avenue South. The site plan also shows a series of pedestrian walkways throughout the site. The pedestrian space in between Tower 2 and the historic Voorhees building includes retail and lobby entrances, as well as outdoor dining space. Similar activation is seen with the other buildings on the site. A pedestrian walkway is proposed to cut through the middle of Tower 1 at the ground level, further connecting the site. The site plan also includes a proposed 8th Avenue mid-block crosswalk that would connect to the pedestrian space that is between the historic Antiques Mall and Tower 1. Here's a view of the proposed facade of Tower 2 from the south. This view would be observed moving northbound on 8th Avenue as well as from Division Street. Low-scale development and surface parking lots currently exist in the parcels adjacent to this facade. However, this land is at the intersection of 8th Avenue and Division Street and is a prime spot for redevelopment. Buildings of up to 20 stories would be permitted at this location as of right, and they can achieve up to 28 stories at this location through the bonus height program. With how narrow Allison Street is and the potential for buildings of increased height adjacent to this facade, this side of Tower 2 has the potential to be blocked from views in the future. Here's another view of that south facade, but this time as a 3D rendering. The area with the potential for increased height is kind of in the foreground there. Here's a view of the proposed facade from the north. This view would be observed moving southbound on 7th Avenue on the north side of the railroad tracks. Large portions of this facade would be blocked from view by Tower 1 from all perspectives. However, pedestrians would be able to see it at an angle from Fog Street. The left side of your screen shows the proposed facade from the west. The top portion of the elevation would be visible head-on from 8th Avenue, as it would extend above the 5-story historic Voorhees building that sits in front of it. The full extent of the building would be visible at an angle from Fog Street, the pedestrian areas throughout the site, as well as the intersection of 8th Avenue and Division Street. The right side of your screen shows the proposed facade from the east. This view would be observed moving westbound on Division Street Bridge and westbound on Fog Street on the east side of the railroad tracks. As mentioned before, redevelopment on the parcels adjacent to the south facade could further block views of these facades from certain perspectives in the future. Voorhees Tower 2 is requesting 3 modifications from the downtown code. Number 1, to eliminate step-back requirements on 7th Avenue South. The Gold South subdistrict requires a 15-foot minimum step-back for buildings 8 stories or greater along public streets between the 4th and 8th story. The applicant has requested to eliminate the step-back requirements due to the termination of 7th Avenue adjacent to the property. Number 2, to allow for a greater floor-to-floor height for the 3rd floor liner unit. The downtown code requires the height of an individual story above the 2nd story to not exceed 18 feet. The applicant has requested to allow for a 27-foot, 3-inch 3rd floor in order for the liner unit to fully screen the parking garage behind it. And number 3, to adjust the major and collector street plan requirements on 7th Avenue. The downtown code requires new construction to meet MCSP standards on their street frontages. The MCSP calls for a 4-foot wide green zone and an 8-foot wide pedestrian zone along the 7th Avenue South frontage. The applicant has requested to eliminate the green zone and provide a 6.7-foot wide pedestrian zone due to the termination of 7th Avenue adjacent to the property. We'll now review each of those modification requests in a little bit more detail. The first one is the step back request. The required 15-foot step back between the 4th and 8th story is intended to allow increased height or increased light and air to reach the street for the benefit of pedestrians and to avoid a canyon effect. Step backs are most important on narrow streets with increased pedestrian activity. The applicant has requested to eliminate the step back requirements along 7th Avenue due to the termination of the street at the railroad lines adjacent to the property. Because 7th Avenue no longer bridges over the railroad at this location, more light and air is able to reach the street level. This is also helped by the open air space above the railroad tracks adjacent to the proposed building. It is also reasonable to think that due to this being a dead-end street and the 7th Avenue facade acting as the back of the building, there will be less pedestrian activity at this location. The next modification involves the maximum floor height of a floor of an individual story above the 2nd story. The downtown code says these stories shall not exceed 18 feet in height. The intent of this is to establish reasonable floor-to-floor heights while preserving the proportionality of the building. Without reasonable limits to the height of each floor, unpredictable outcomes could occur, very contrary to the intent of height limitations. In this case, the applicant has requested that the third floor of the building, which is a garage liner unit, be 27 feet 3 inches in height. This height is needed to fully screen the parking garage that sits behind the liner unit, as shown in the images on the left of your screen. Staff finds that the desire to screen the parking garage that's positioned behind the liner unit as a worthy trade-off for the increased height of the third story. When considering this modification, the largest concern is maintaining proportionality on the building's exterior. Although the third story is 5 to 7 feet taller than the first and second stories, the visual language on the exterior does a good job to break up the height of the third floor and match it to the floors below it. The next modification involves the required improvements to 7th Avenue South as stated in the Major and Collector Street Plan. As a reminder, the MCSP calls for a 4-foot wide green zone and an 8-foot wide pedestrian zone along 7th Avenue at this location. These elements are intended to provide a wide enough sidewalk for pedestrians to comfortably pass one another, as well as a buffered space that separates pedestrians from adjacent vehicular traffic. The applicant has requested to eliminate the required green zone in full and decrease the required sidewalk from 8 feet to 6.7 feet. This request is being proposed due to the termination of 7th Avenue South at the railroad lines adjacent to the property. These MCSP standards were put in place when 7th Avenue was a direct connection between Division Street and Lafayette Street. Now that the bridge over the railroad has been removed, 7th Avenue is a dead-end street at this location. The only vehicular traffic in this area will be accessing Tower 2's parking garage. Also, with this facade acting as the back of the building, there will be less pedestrian activity. In addition to these modifications already discussed, an overall height modification has been requested. The Gold South subdistrict has a maximum height of 10 stories in this location. An additional 6 for a total of 16 stories may be allowed using the bonus height program. The applicant has requested an overall height modification to allow for 20 total stories. As a recap, there are 3 parts of the overall height modification process. The first 2 parts of the process have already been completed. First, the executive director has made a determination that the applicant has made all reasonable efforts to use the bonus height program. In this case, the bonuses being utilized include historic building preservation, upper level garage liner and underground parking, public parking, and pervious surfaces. Secondly, there must be a community meeting for property owners within 300 feet. This meeting was held on Friday, February 26, 2021. No members of the public attended this meeting. However, a recording is available to view online. The third part requires the Planning Commission to make a final determination on the overall height modification after a recommendation from this body.
Hey, Jared, I think we might have just lost audio with you. Let's hold on for a second. We can just hold for a second. We're just going to reestablish connections, and we appreciate your patience while we work through these virtual meeting issues.
Eric, while you're doing that, this is Kim Hawkins. Do you mind me asking, I believe our presentation of Tower 1 and Tower 2 is combined. So I didn't know if it's possible to run through Tower 2 and Tower 1 and then do one presentation. Just let us know if that works.
Sure, we can definitely answer a procedural question. Yes, so if you would like to present all your information after this, and then with the next item, simply just refer to that or give other information as needed, that would be appropriate.
Thank you.
So Jared was booted off the call for some reason. We're establishing a reconnection right now, so he should be joining us in a minute, and then we'll continue the content of the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, can everyone hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. I heard you guys the whole time, but I guess my audio cut out for some reason. So let me get us back into this.
Sounds good, Jared. We can hear you. We're just going to pick up the presentation where I left off. No worries.
Okay. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
I will start kind of where I heard Eric jump in and say you guys lost me. Let me know if I need to go back a minute. But so I was about to jump into the bonuses that the development has achieved through the bonus height program. 10 stories of bonus height have been earned. However, only 6 of those stories can be used through the bonus height program in the Gulch South subdistrict. Hence the need for an overall height modification request. The most prominent bonus being used is the historic building preservation bonus. Unused entitlements from the historic Antiques Mall and the historic Voorhees building are being transferred to Voorhees Tower 2. This accounts for 6 stories of the bonus height earned. The underground parking upper level garage liner bonus is being used to provide approximately 1.5 floors of underground parking and around 4,500 square feet of upper level garage liner space. Together, these account for 2 stories of the bonus height earned. The public parking bonus is being used to provide parking spaces for public use. This parking is accessible to pedestrians off Fog Street. This bonus accounts for 2 stories of the bonus height earned. Finally, the pervious surfaces bonus is being used to provide pervious pavers on the ground level of the site and vegetated green roof on the 4th level amenity deck. Based on a recommendation from the Design Review Committee, the Planning Commission may grant additional height for exceptional design, including but not limited to unique architecture, exceptionally strong streetscape, and improvement of the project's relationship to surrounding properties. The following slides will take a look at how exceptional design is being achieved in this development. The architecture of Tower 2 provides a contemporary interpretation of the historic Voorhees building and the use of complementary materials and the articulation and division of its facade. Additionally, the recessed sections of the building break up the facade into horizontal and vertical segments, which create notches for balconies and a unique textured look. This rhythm continues up to the top of the tower, resulting in a dynamic roof line. The scale of Tower 2's podium falls in line with that of the historic Voorhees building, which creates a common scale among the two, especially for the pedestrian experience. The Voorhees Master Plan provides a unique pedestrian experience through its use of pedestrian-only walkways and plazas throughout the site. These walkways connect to one another and with the sidewalks on 8th Avenue South and Fog Street to create a campus-like atmosphere. Pedestrians would be able to access various retail and lobby entrances for each of the 4 buildings using these spaces. Ground level and upper level garage liners, space for outdoor dining, street trees, and other landscaping throughout the site contribute to a vibrant and active streetscape. It is also important to recognize the proposed mid-block crosswalk that will let pedestrians easily get across 8th Avenue South to and from the Voorhees site. This connection would help people move around the Gulch as a whole as well. The site in which Tower 2 is being proposed is located within a supplemental policy area. Supplemental policies are put in place within a community plan when areas need more specific guidance than is included in the community character manual. In this case, the downtown community plan identifies the area outlined here in purple dashed line as appropriate for consideration of high-rise building height, 20 stories and taller. This would be allowed in exchange for public benefits provided by the development, including but not limited to affordable and workforce housing, the downtown code's bonus height program, modification processes, or rezoning to a specific plan. The supplemental policy also says that building design should result in a unique architecture that seeks to improve the public realm and city skyline. Staff finds that Voorhees Tower 2 has utilized the bonus height program and modification process to achieve worthy public benefits. Tower 2 also provides unique architecture elements that are not currently found in the Nashville skyline. The Voorhees Master Plan, and specifically Tower 2, offer unique qualities in architectural expression in its site design, building massing, and overall aesthetic. Staff is recommending approval of the requested major modifications and also recommends that the Downtown Code Design Review Committee recommend approval of the overall height modification to the Planning Commission with the following conditions and deferral without all conditions. Number 1, all bonus height actions identified in this application, including those that require a deed or restrictive covenant, must be approved prior to building permit approval. Number 2, the applicant shall coordinate with Metro Public Works on the proposed 8th Avenue South mid-block crosswalk. Number 3, all overhead lines along the master plan site, 8th Avenue frontage shall be buried. Number 4, both the historic Antiques Mall and historic Voorhees building must be designated as historic landmark zoning overlays prior to building permit approval. And finally, number 5, approval of the overall height modification shall be reconsidered by the Planning Commission if either the historic Antiques Mall or the historic Voorhees building are not able to achieve or maintain historic landmark overlay status, with a recommendation from the Downtown Code Design Review Committee. Please note that the underlined text was added to the condition number 5 after staff reports were sent out. All 5 of these conditions are meant to ensure that the commitments made as part of this application are fully realized. And that concludes my presentation. I'll now open things up to questions from the committee. As a reminder, the applicant will also give a presentation after these questions. And forgive me, I think this is when I got cut out. I heard Kim ask about presentations. I didn't hear the response from.
Sure, Jared. We actually talked about it a little bit. The applicant is desiring to give a presentation of both items at once because of the interconnectedness. We indicated that that would be okay, and that during their portion of the second item that they can either reiterate portions of that presentation or just refer to that.
Okay, so I'll leave it open for now, or do we want to move forward with the second presentation?
Sure. So this, for the Design Review Committee members, this would be an appropriate time to ask Jared if you have any questions regarding the report. Once we are done with questions, we would move into the applicant's presentation. But first, before we do that, let's just see if there's any questions from the committee on that report.
Eric, this is Ron Lustig. I will need to recuse myself from any questioning.
Okay, thank you, Ron. All right, seeing no questions, and you can always ask during the discussion phase as a reminder. We'll move into the applicant's presentation. May I ask who is hosting the PDF on your end from the applicant group?
Hi, Eric. It's Ryan Terrell. I will be hosting the PDF.
Wonderful. Chartik, do you mind transferring the ability to be a presenter to Ryan? You can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start with letting Andrew Donchez introduce the project.
Hi, guys. It looks like Andrew might be having some technical difficulty there, showing as low bandwidth.
Okay. Excuse me. Well, we can certainly move forward. And Andrew, feel free to jump in if you get that resolved.
Ryan, I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. Eric, Jared, members of Metro Planning staff, members of the DRC. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Andrew Donchez. I'm a principal at Samara Road. We are the owners and developers of this project, the site. With us this morning, we have members from our design team, including Eric Klotz, Laura Bean, Ryan Terrell from Eric Swenson Associates, as well as Kim Hawkins and Parker Hawkins from Hawkins Partners. I'm not sure if Philip Neal's on the phone, but I pretend to be a civil engineer at times, so I'm happy to answer any questions on that front as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. We appreciate your time and consideration of our project. It's a project that we are really excited about. Happy to put it in front of you. Happy to give you the overview of our vision for this little part of the Gulch and part of Nashville. Jared did a great overview. I'm not really sure I have too much to add. Just give you kind of the brief overview of our vision for the project. One of the top priorities as we started developing the design was to use the project to really be a catalyst for smart urban core growth. Focusing on street level activation, creating an experience that was unique in the market, something that promotes sustainability, walkability, and really, we believe is unique, providing a live, work, play environment in this little part of the Gulch. The focus of the application obviously is the two mixed-use residential towers. They're the centerpiece of kind of this vision for our little part of the Gulch here. And our goal is really to create a revitalized urban district that really, with the interconnection between the historic Voorhees building and historic Antiques building, afforded us the freedom to really imagine the ground level experience. I'm not sure if some of you have seen it. There was some press recently. We're going to be branding the project as PASEO, South Gulch or PASEO Nashville. And that term PASEO really speaks to the experience that we hope to create at the ground level. As well designed and attractive as the towers are, we really wanted to build this thing from the ground up because that's where the public really experiences it. That's where the stakeholders in the Gulch and in Nashville will really experience this project. And we think we've created something that kind of really seamlessly connects the existing buildings, connects the retail, the office that will be in those existing buildings, with new retail, new office space, new residential, and an attractive package that not just faces 8th Avenue, but activates into the site and creates a very unique experience at the street level. With that, I'll turn it over to the design team and they can walk you through the overview of the design.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. As Andrew mentioned, Jared did a fantastic job at outlining the project and what why we're here, the purposes of this meeting. We just wanted to paint a little more context and give a little more background as we go through the presentation. So starting here with this view along 8th Avenue South, looking east at the intersection of Fog Street, just as far as labels go, so it's clear, historic Antiques Mall down here on the left side of the image in the foreground. We have Tower 1 behind that, which is seeking bona fide certification. And then Fog Street separates Tower 1 and Tower 2. So Tower 2 to the east of the Bill Voorhees building here on its path to the height modification. And then we have the Bill Voorhees building on the right, down here in the foreground. Like I said, Jared already did an excellent job outlining the project. We're in the sub-district of Gulch South. And we have a slide later that I'm showing our summary of our modifications for both projects. As Jared already mentioned, the master plan here in orange, Antiques Mall to the north as the site sort of wedges to the north. We've got Tower 1, 16 stories proposed, and then Tower 2, 20 stories. That is to the east of the Voorhees building. And then we have our overlay here with the supplemental policy. And then in blue, you can see the either under construction, built, or proposed residential developments. And then again, just outlining our proximity to that key intersection of 8th Avenue South and Division Street, where properties may be allowed to go up to 28 stories with bonus site participation. One thing we do want to show is a conceptual street section through 8th Avenue South looking east. So starting from the left, working our way to the right or south, you've got Antiques Mall, you've got proposed Tower 1 story, or I'm sorry, 16-story massing with retail and a lobby entry here on the ground level. And then above that, we have office liner for 2 stories that completely screens the parking garage. And the tower does step back 15 feet from 8th Avenue South and from that podium. And then moving along, we've got the Voorhees building with Tower 2, proposed 20-story massing in the background. And then at that key intersection, just wanted to highlight a conceptual spec office building of 28 stories, and with the 14 floor to floor dimension, what that could start to look and feel like as it relates to our project and within the neighborhood. Wanted to touch on one of the key components here for us, which was a huge driver as we designed the project from a master plan standpoint, is contextual improvement and historic preservation. So wanted to share a few images of the ongoing restoration efforts. We'll start here with the Bill Voorhees building. And so just a little bit of background. Originally, it was built in the 30s, and it served as a regional warehouse and distribution center for John Deere. And then in the late 60s, it was purchased by Bill Voorhees, hence the recognizable hand-painted signage at the top of the building. And so we're just sharing a few images of the ongoing construction, so new windows and exterior and interior improvements. And then moving on to the Antiques building. So this actually predates the Bill Voorhees building. This was built in the early 1900s. And then you can see the GP Rose and Company signage is believed to be some of the oldest hand-painted signage in Nashville. And so we've got some new windows. We've got some new entries, interior and exterior renovation. We also had a mural plan for the southeast of the project. And we're going to get into a little bit of some of the thinking behind the design and what was driving our thought process there, but just wanted to show an overall shot, an aerial view looking northeast in the city to kind of cite the historic buildings within the larger context of the master plan. And with that, I will hand it over to Kim Hawkins to talk about the streetscape.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that. For Tower 2, we're really focused on that overall height modification request. And with that comes requirements for exceptional streetscape and creating a better relationship to the surrounding properties. So next slide. It all really starts with that extraordinary opportunity that we have to re-engage and activate historic buildings with adaptive reuse to extend their life. And the PASEO project really allows us to do just that, while honoring those buildings by stepping away from their facades and creating a more fine-grained sequence of passageways or PASEOs that add to the experience of the site and really connecting the existing Voorhees building, Tower 2, Allison Street, and north going towards Tower 1 and the Antiques building. As noted by Jared, the historic Antique Mall and Voorhees will both be protected with a landmark overlay. We are filing that legislation concurrently with the overall height modification process. Antiques is located, the Antiques Mall building is located about 6 feet from the curb, and there is a request for the modification of the MCSP because that existing frontage location of the historic building. At Voorhees, the other historic building, we can provide the 10-foot sidewalk width for a majority of that frontage with the exception of the building entrance. The frontage zone is not provided in that location due to the existing frontage location of that historic building. And knowing that pedestrian access and connectivity is a real need of this area and the district, we have added a pedestrian hawk signal or crossing at 8th Avenue across from Arnold's. Really important to have good connectivity to Arnold's. And the street frontage and the passageways all have activated frontages for the retail tenants and the residents and lobbies as we create this wandering network of places to discover and hopefully come back to. Next slide. This view is the view across the now private Fog Street that goes between Tower 1 and Tower 2 that looks north towards this passageway that leads to the Antiques Mall structure. There is a lot of glazing and active engagement from the uses here. And I think this PASEO gateway really emphasizes the pedestrian priority of this project. Next slide. And if you're on 8th Avenue, looking down the now private Fog Street to Tower 2, you see the building height step down as Tower 2 building engages the street and really honors its adjacency to Voorhees. There's about a 30+ foot setback between the historic Voorhees building and Tower 2. That building relationship really provides that buffer to Voorhees. And the use of glazing and openness of the building facades provide that flow between the indoor and outdoor space. Next slide. This overall view of 8th Avenue facade indicates the massing of the towers that kind of take their cue from the mass and the scale of the Voorhees warehouse, but at no point try to replicate that. I'll also note that our vehicular access is provided from the 8th Avenue frontage, or one can tie into the garage access along 7th Avenue behind this, providing a better distribution on the site. And of course, the removal of power lines along this east side of 8th, which allows a more protected and developed streetscape, including street trees, just providing, I think, a bit more of a delightful walk and becoming a much more walkable neighborhood. And Ryan will walk you through the architecture.
Thank you, Kim.
Kim, this is Ben York. Can I add in there and ask one question about streetscape since we're there before we get to architecture?
Sure.
Along, as you mentioned, along 8th Avenue frontage in front of the historic antique building, there is a narrowness in that sidewalk. Has there been any discussion or thought with NES about bringing some of those overhead utilities underground to make that a more accessible and a more pedestrian-friendly area? And you don't have to answer that if y'all have not had that conversation yet, but that's something we would like to look into.
I'll let Ryan answer that. If I know there have been discussions, so I'll let Ryan respond to that, or we can deal with that as we get into the broader discussion.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm curious, is Philip Neal on the call?
Philip Neal is here. I'm Philip Neal with Killinghorn, civil engineer on the project. Ben, yeah, to answer your question, most of the utilities along our frontage on 8th Avenue are actually more telecom. We have a little bit of electric on each end, and most of those are, or the electric is to serve Antiques Mall, the Antiques Mall building. So our plan is to relocate those as much as possible. The electric service that crosses 8th Avenue might have to be rerouted a little bit and might be aerial over 8th Avenue, but all of the telecom that's parallel to the frontage, we have been in contact with all of the different, I think it's about 4 or 5 different providers, and have begun the cooperation and coordination to get those underground.
Thank you, Philip. So I'll keep going here as we talk about the architecture. And so, as I was saying, I wanted to give a little bit of context and background into the thought process and the design. I think first and foremost, it's about taking our cue from the existing buildings. There's an existing rich industrial character and aesthetic established on the site through the use, on the Voorhees building, the concrete superstructure, and that rigid grid, and also the use of masonry on both projects. And so starting off with the podiums, it was important for us to kind of create a common scale through the strategic stepping back and alignment with the improvements on top of the Bill Voorhees building. And again, it's all in an effort to create a cohesive district in full integration, but again, a contemporary lens on that industrial aesthetic. And as I go through these, I won't spend too much time. Jared already did a great job of explaining. But wanted to talk through some of the materiality as well. Starting with Tower 1, looking from the west, we've got a dark metal banding. We've got masonry, opportunities to break the massing, again, to kind of find that balance between the old and the new. Looking at the north elevation here, the dark metal banding on the tower of the project is actually proportionally relates to the concrete superstructure of the Bill Voorhees building. And then the entry to the PASEO on the north side here is kind of framed by the steel perforated screen with a steel frame. again, using different shades of masonry, window wall, glass storefront, clear glass on the ground level. And then where we have openings in the garage, we're introducing a metal screen with planting. And then looking from the south here on Tower 1, as the footprint of the tower kind of curves around and creates a dynamic shape as a result of the site. Again, starting with the dark metal panel industrial banding, and then introducing a lighter metal panel that's vertically emphasized in a kind of shifting, which is a controlled yet dynamic gesture, again, about that contemporary detail. And pausing for a moment here to talk about materiality. And so, the majority of both projects, we have glass, so it's window wall system on the tower, storefront, and curtain wall on the podiums. And we have panelized metal wall systems planned. And again, masonry at the podiums and some on the amenity decks of both towers. We do have ground face CMU, and that is only for the sides of the garage that front the CSX rail. And concrete, again, kind of that industrial aesthetic, we're exposing concrete columns where we can, specifically on both towers. That occurs at the amenity level. And then softening the materials, we're introducing wood as soffits throughout several different opportunities in both projects. As we move into Tower 2, with 20 stories proposed here, we have, just explaining the massing, a real big opportunity for us to break the massing is defined by the entry into the residential lobby. So there's sort of a thin spine here, and again, that dark metal panel, sort of industrial banding. And then moving along to the south side, again, this was a sort of a key elevation for us, especially the approach from the city from the south, starting with that rigid grid, and then pushing and pulling and creating depth for balcony opportunities in a controlled manner, ultimately terminating with a dynamic roof line. And again, same material palette we're working from as Tower 1. And then I'll just kind of pause here for a second. Again, this is the overall aerial shot looking northeast to kind of give a full scale experience view with the new buildings and the historic buildings. One more shot looking again, 8th Avenue South looking east. And wanted to summarize again, Jared already did a good job of this, but just real quick to summary for Tower 1, we're gonna get into this after this, but we've got 10 stories, kind of by right. We are pursuing 6 additional that's allowed through the bonus site program, 2 of which are coming from public parking, 2 are coming from underground and liner, the office liner that fronts 8th Avenue South. And then the remaining 2 stories will be coming from the preservation of both the antiques and the Voorhees building. Section diagram outlining our modification request for Tower 1. So along 8th Avenue South, we have the liner, and due to some of the depth of the structure at our amenity deck, and to be able to fully screen that, we're requesting 27.3 instead of the 18, I believe, that's after 2 stories. Real quick summary here, 10 stories by right, 6 stories through historic preservation, and 2 stories with underground parking and liner. Our loft units here that are on the corner of the building, that's a sort of an internal intersection of the master plan, and that's helped to kind of screen the garage. And also there's views of that along 8th Avenue South, so it was important for us to screen that. Also, the remaining 2 are provided through public parking, so 20 stories total. And we do have some pervious surface where we can throughout the master plan. And a section east and west looking south, we can see our loft liner units here that sort of front or view the backside of the Voorhees building. We've got retail at the base, and the same request here, as it relates to the structural depth of our amenity level and being able to fully screen that from view. We're requesting a 27.3 floor-to-floor height for our 3rd story, 16 stories through the bonus site program, and then we're just showing our 4 stories that we're requesting for a height modification. And Jared already touched on this, but our modification request for a sidewalk, a 6-foot plus or minus sidewalk in lieu of the 8+4. And then our step back request. Now the building does step back partially 4 feet, but not for the full width of the frontage of the building. And with that, I will just want to say thank you for your time, and open it up to questions if that's the appropriate time for that.
It is absolutely the appropriate time, Ryan. Thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from the design review committee to the applicant group? And feel free to just unmute yourself. We're not going to control that for design review committee members.
This is James Moore. I have a question just about the, first of all, thank you for the presentation. It's an exciting project. Having watched this piece of land for a long time growing up here, it's exciting to see. I guess one of the kind of a two-part question. One is, I guess, looking at the MCSP exception on 7th Avenue, as well as the exemplary streetscape justification for the bonus height. I guess I'm curious, I mean, are we able to talk about Fog Street? And in particular, I'm just curious about the number of street trees in Fog Street, especially given that, we're not able to put them along the antique frontage, of course, because of its, existing state, but also that, the 7th Avenue side is kind of exempting itself from the street trees. And it looked like there was maybe one, but I was just kind of curious, I know it's a private street, but it's, if we're talking exemplary public benefit, even on a private street, I'd just be curious to hear about the porosity, the landscape plan, and especially the urban forestry part of Fox Street.
I'll be glad to address that, James. So first of all, you are correct in that we are able to add that along 8th Avenue in front of Tower 1 and in front of historic Voorhees, even where that is tied down a little bit. Fog Street is a private street. We have created that entire frontage as a shared street so that it has a very high pedestrian priority. So because of that, and the width that you see right there, we are required to have 3 lanes at the intersection of 8th Avenue, 2 turn lanes, 1 turn lane left, 1 turn lane right, and 1 coming in. That really ties us down in terms of overall width right there. And as you can see, because the existing historic Voorhees building comes out to within a couple of feet. Let me get my scale right here and I can tell you exactly, but it is about 6 to 7 from the existing tower at Voorhees. So what we've done in there that you can see a little bit in some of those images is we have used a lot of pots with vegetation. We think it's really important to be able to accommodate the pedestrian there. And so you kind of see this idea of how pots are used kind of throughout to activate and provide additional green. And then providing that PASEO between, that's about a 20-foot PASEO that kind of goes between that private Fog Street to the alley system that comes off of historic antiques. That is also planted within. So we do have a lot of program that is fitted within Fog Street, including the 2-way, that's our primary access into the parking garages for both Tower 1 and Tower 2. That is also our rideshare drop-off. So that particular dimension is very highly utilized in terms of accommodating vehicular and pedestrian program there. So we have provided throughout this in a very urban kind of context that use of pots and planters throughout to provide that additional green while the street trees are primarily along 8th Avenue.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And I guess one additional question, Ken, too, is I just see that this is the dumpster shared back of house area, I guess. Is that, I mean, I see green there. Is that also a pervious landscape area or?
It is, and that is gated from the terminus. If you come along Fog Street and come in, and then you have your turn-ins into the Tower 1 and Tower 2 parking garage. So that area, it is pervious. It does have a small little dog run in there and pervious area and is screened then from your primary vehicular access coming in. I also kind of point out that the PASEO idea certainly comes from that passageway between Fog Street up to Antiques Mall, but it continues down along Allison Street. So that kind of similar vocabulary of a pretty rich urban streetscape, again, using pots, movable pots and planters kind of all along there, helps to activate the Voorhees side, and that's the residential lobby on Tower 2. So I would call this a highly urban and highly pedestrianized environment that I think is representative of what this development is really trying to achieve.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's really helpful, Kim. Thank you. I think my primary concern was making sure any landscape areas or street trees that we were, giving up on 7th, were accounted for at least within the development. And I think that's helpful to hear that explanation. Thank you.
This is Ben Mosley, and my question is about really maybe this is more of a developer. I know financing is not our purview, but the presentation sort of was as a whole, and as a review committee, we have to review the buildings individually and are giving approvals to those buildings individually. Is this going to be all constructed, sort of open the site up at one time and Tower 1 and Tower 2 constructed together, or is there a possibility that one would come and the other might come later?
Dan, happy to speak to that. We're viewing this as one project, which is why we kind of presented it that way. We think, the interconnected nature, the importance of, each piece to the whole is why we've kind of approached it, even though they're two technically separate applications. Our intent is to build the towers in phases. I think from a practical construction staging perspective, it would be difficult to build them both simultaneously. So yeah, we're going to build Tower 1 first. Tower 2 will be a second phase of the project, but we'll lag. We anticipate the construction start of Tower 2 would be 8 to 10 months behind the construction start of Tower 1. The idea from a business plan perspective being that we can complete all the heavy construction of, excavation, concrete, superstructure before we deliver the first tower. So that portion of the construction phase is over with. And we can, begin leasing Tower 1 and roll right into leasing Tower 2 as we're finishing up the lease up of Tower 1.
Thanks for that. And that makes sense, just both purely from how the economics of these projects work, but also constructability. I asked that question in how we might respond and how we consider, because the project is strong individually, but certainly stronger as the assemblage of its parts, and that if there's some gates that have to open, or I guess dominoes that have to fall for you to be able to proceed even with a start. I wanted to get that clear in my head, and you've cleared that up. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Are there any questions for the applicant team?
If no one else has, this is James Moore. I had another one. Sorry. I guess my question, I'd love to hear more about just the standards or what we're going to be holding the project to for the crosswalk. As far as, is it the committing to work with Metro Public Works, or is there a certain design standard that we're saying? I'm just curious to hear more about what the project's being held to here.
Are you referring to the pedestrian hawk signal?
Yeah, yes, sorry, on 8th Avenue, yes.
Yeah, Philip, do you want to address that more specifically? I know there have been many, many discussions.
Sure. I think most of us will be familiar with some of the mid-block crosswalks that have a flashing beacon on a pole that's within the sidewalk. What we're proposing here is a much grander form of that. It is, and Ben York can probably correct me, I think it's one of the first, maybe the second in Tennessee or Middle Tennessee area, but it's called a hawk signal. And what that is, it's over, there's a mast arm that crosses the travel lanes. And so it has several beacons, and it's activated by a push button. So it is obviously with safety in mind and prioritizing the pedestrian connectivity. That's what we are proposing with this project.
I might add, James, that is being added because I know one of the large urban design deficits of 8th Avenue is pedestrian connectivity across. And this just provides an opportunity to provide that safely and really enhance the broader connectivity of this particular project, and I would say to the broader district.
Thank you so much.
And I think Ben might need to go. Ben, if you have anything to add, we would appreciate that. Otherwise, we would be looking for more questions.
No, I do have to go. I apologize, everyone. I have a council member meeting that I have to go to, but we will fully vet the site plan with you guys when that is applicable and appropriate. We are working with your team on the pedestrian crossing. It will be PED actuated and colloquially called a hawk, as the team has already kind of spoken to. That is the desired end goal, and that's the direction we're going to pursue. So that's where we're headed.
Are there any further questions for the applicant team? If not, we'd be moving into a period of discussion. Seeing no questions, we can open the discussion. And just to clarify for everyone, the item, and actually this is a good opportunity. Charlie, can we return the presentation to Jared just so we can have the conditions up there if the committee eventually moves to take action on this item? Okay, thank you. And Jared, if you could put those up, that would be great for the discussion. But we are in a period of discussion. If the committee would like to make a motion as well, that would be appropriate. I think I'm seeing Ben with his hand raised, Ben Mosley. If you would like to unmute.
The raised hand from a while back for questions for the applicants. So I don't have any further questions. I'll kick it off here though. I think you know, as a collection, the two projects together are very powerful, well scaled, and certainly I think just viewed overall achieve just as a whole achieve something that is not the easiest site in the world. With the railroad crossing and dealing with two historic assets that I think have been respected and treated well in the project. Those are my comments in general, that I think it's been definitely handled in so many ways. And the bonus height, for me, makes sense in the right place on the project, and the way that, you know, where there's opportunities on 7th to articulate the facade and bring it down and meet the street, even though that street is sort of dead end and not a primary street. In those areas where I think we as a committee in the past have expected a design team, a developer to meet the street in a way that the DTC intends and probably even exceeds some of the minimums. This project does that, in my opinion, and it does it very well.
Any other discussion?
This is Eric. This is William Hastings. Can you hear me?
Yes, William. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to echo Ben's comments. I think considering the complexity of the site, the geometry of the site, you know, the preservation of the two historic buildings, the dead end condition at 7th, the rail constrictions, the requests for modifications are minor in my mind, considering all of those challenges. And I think the additional height for the building for Tower 1 and its placement and proximity to 8th Avenue seems like the appropriate place if we are going to grant additional height. So I'm pleased with their solution and think the modifications seem completely reasonable.
Yeah, this is James Moore, just echoing Ben and William, and just appreciating the investment in the pedestrian around both in the private area, the PASEOs and the streetscape. I think it's great.
If there is any more discussion, we'll be happy to hear it. Otherwise, we would be seeking a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as submitted with staff recommendations.
Hey, William, just for the sake of clarity, are you recommending approval of the major modifications and then also recommending approval of the overall height modification? That would be the correct way to make that.
So it's two separate projects. So do we need two separate motions also?
Yes. So just to explain to everybody where we are, this is currently Tower 2. This is the tower that's 20 stories that's seeking an overall height modification as well as several other major modifications as Jared went over. We would need two separate motions. Thank you, Jared, for this, these items. Basically, after this one, we'll go back to number 2, which will probably seem a little bit redundant, but since they are two separate properties right now, we are treating them as two separate projects, especially because one goes to the Planning Commission and the other one is just requesting major modifications and use the existing bonus height program. So a motion would be for Voorhees Tower 2 on the modifications and the overall height modification.
So moved. No, just kidding. So my motion then is for recommendation for approval of the for Tower 2 for the modifications. In addition to that modifications, also the major modification for the additional height. So I'm assuming that would be for the liner, the MCSP modification on 7th, the overall height modification from 16 to 20, and what's the other one? Step back.
Jared, if we can go back to that, but I believe you're correct, William.
Yeah, that is.
Sorry, trying to do it from memory.
That was excellent from memory.
Yeah, overall height, step back, floor to floor at the liner, and the MCSP.
That is a valid motion. Is there a second?
Ben Mosley, I'll second.
Seeing a motion in a second. Thank you, William, for clarifying that. We do appreciate that.
Sorry.
No worries.
I think I fumbled that one pretty well.
We understood the intent. It was clear. So with that, I'll do a roll call. Oh, actually, sorry. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion on the motion, we would be moving to the previous question. I'll just do a roll call vote of committee members, starting with Ben.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
Ron.
I must recuse myself.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Russ.
Yes.
Tamara.
Yes.
William.
Yes.
That is a unanimous motion to approve the major modifications requested and to recommend approval of the overall height modification to the Planning Commission. With that being said, we are moving to the second item, which is going to contain a lot of the same information as the previous item. So Jared will be giving a presentation on that. Then you may ask questions of that. And after that, basically the applicant will be either choosing to give additional information from their presentation or they may not. And then we'll do the same general format of moving into discussion and then eventually a motion. So Jared, if you want to take it away.
Sure, yep. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, committee members. Again, this is Jared Islis with the Planning Department. The next item on the agenda is a request for approval of a floor-to-floor height modification to the downtown code. The subject property is located within the Gold South subdistrict of the downtown code and is located near the intersection of 8th Avenue South and Fogg Street. The proposed building, Voorhees Tower 1, is 16 stories in height, includes 278 apartment units, 9,000 square feet of retail restaurant space, 20,000 square feet of office space, and both underground and structured parking for a total of 290 vehicular parking spaces. Here's an aerial image of the Tower 1 location, highlighted in red. Tower 1 shares the same general site plan as the previously discussed Tower 2. Here are a few additional things to note about Tower 1. It is positioned on 8th Avenue South in between the historic Voorhees building and the historic Antiques Mall. Its only frontage per the downtown code is on 8th Avenue South. Tower 1 has one parking garage entrance and it is accessed from Fogg Street. The space in between Tower 1 and the historic Antiques Mall contributes to the network of pedestrian walkways throughout the site, as does a ground level pedestrian walkway that is proposed to cut through the middle of Tower 1, referred to as the PASEO. Retail and lobby entrances are accessible from these locations. Here's a view of the proposed west elevation. As previously mentioned, Tower 1 sits in between the two existing historic buildings. This view would be observed from 8th Avenue by both pedestrians and vehicular traffic. This is another view of the west facade as a 3D rendering. You can also see parts of the south-facing facade from this image. Here's a proposed south elevation. The view would be observed moving northbound on 8th Avenue. Portions of the facade would be blocked from view by the historic Voorhees building in Tower 2 from that perspective. Pedestrians would be able to see this facade at an angle from Fogg Street as well as the pedestrian area in between Tower 2 and the historic Voorhees building. You can see the pedestrian walkway that cuts through Tower 1 at the bottom middle of the image labeled as PASEO. Portions of the north-facing facade could be visible moving southbound on 8th Avenue, but might be blocked by the historic Antiques Mall and the railroad overpass. Pedestrians would be able to see this facade at an angle from 8th Avenue or the pedestrian space in between Tower 1 and the historic Antiques Mall. Voorhees Tower 1 is requesting one modification from the downtown code. Like the request associated with Tower 2, it is to allow for a greater floor-to-floor height for the third-story liner unit. Again, the downtown code requires the height of an individual story above the second story to not exceed 18 feet. And just like in Tower 2, the applicant has proposed a 27-foot, 3-inch third floor in order for the liner unit to fully screen the parking garage. The diagram on the slide shows the location of the modification request in red. The same findings from Tower 2 apply here. The applicant's desire to screen the parking garage with the liner unit is a worthy trade-off for increased height of the third story. Additionally, the visual language on the exterior does a good job to break up the increased height of the floor. In conclusion, staff is recommending approval of the modification with the following conditions and deferral without all conditions. Conditions 1 through 5 are the same as the conditions from the Tower 2 case and are meant to ensure the commitments made as part of the application are fully realized. Condition number 6 is that the applicant shall provide documentation confirming their ownership of the property included on the plans to the west of parcel number 09314022-500 prior to building permit approvals. This condition has been added to ensure that land currently identified as CSX right-of-way is acquired in the site plan, as the site plan shows the back corner of Tower 1 and both towers' back-of-house operations on this land. The development team has been working with us to provide proof of ownership and have said that a contract to acquire the land is imminent. Planning has received a letter of authorization from CSX for the development team to submit this application in the meantime. And that concludes my presentation for the second case. I'll now open things up to the committee for any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions for Jared on his presentation? Hearing no questions, does the applicant want to add anything that they didn't discuss in the previous item?
No, thank you, Eric. I'll defer to avoid some redundancy. I'm going to be respectful of everybody's time.
We appreciate that. Seeing no presentation there, we'll be moving in directly into a period of discussion. Is there any discussion from the committee members on Voorhees Tower 1? It would also be appropriate to make a motion if the committee so chooses.
It's been Mosley. I'll make a motion to approve the applicant's request for modifications as submitted with the staff conditions.
Is there a second?
James Moore, second.
Thank you, James. Seeing a motion and a second, is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, the previous question is called. We're just going to do a roll call vote here again. Ben?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Ron?
Recuse myself, please.
Sounds good. And apologies for asking every time. We just want to be clear every time. Russ?
Yes.
Tamara?
Yes.
And William?
Yes.
The motion passes with a unanimous 7-0 vote. I believe that is the last item on our agenda, so we will be adjourned. If the committee can stand for 1 second, I just wanted to first thank the applicant for their time today, but also mention that the ethics training that I mentioned over email yesterday, there's a dual poll that is active for that. Alex Dickerson will be leading that and has said that it will only take 30 to 45 minutes, so we would appreciate your time. I would also say that if you have already done this training because you are a member of another Metro board or commission, you do not have to repeat that process. So please let me know if that is the case. But we really would appreciate. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
This is Alex. Just as a heads up, you might not, if you're a member of another board or commission, you might not have already done it, but you will eventually do it. So if you're part of another board or commission, there's no need to go through the training twice.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the clarification, Alex. So seeing no further business, we appreciate all of your time, and we will hear from you the next time we have a meeting. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.